With Halloween so close, I wanted to look at something a little different. My favourite on-screen monster, the werewolf. I love these creatures. They're just so cinematic and impressive when done well. Hell, I've done my own version of the Wolfman before, which if you want to you can see here. It's not great, but, you know. The thing with werewolves is, traditionally they haven't been served too well throughout cinema history. There are a ton of classics starring vampires, Frankenstein knocked it out the park first time around, and you can't move for a zombie film nowadays with some so good even the remakes are excellent. Werewolves though? It's been so long since we had a classic, and there simply just aren't that many decent ones. With lack of quantity and sheer lack of quality, it's hard not to see the werewolf as second tier. The werewolf film has been around almost as long as other monster classics, starting really with 1935's Werewolf of London, with Henry Hull as the titular creature, before finding some success in 1941 with Universal's The Wolfman starring Lon Chaney, both films in makeup by legend Jack Pierce. But true standouts of the subgenre are few and far between. We've had numerous derivatives of both the Wolfman and werewolf style of monster. They're relatively normal people that due to some curse or being bitten by another werewolf, traditionally lose it under a full moon, turning into usually hulking, hairy beasts that spend a night or two ripping the throats out of unsuspecting victims. To spot one is difficult.
What, you mean like full moon, silver bullets and eyebrows that join in the middle?
To kill one, even more so. They're impressive creations, the most primal of the cinematic monster and usually the hardest to get right both in regards to the monster itself and the film around it. So why are they so hard to make work? What makes a truly great werewolf? What is the key? Werewolves are interesting as they are physically so different from their human form. Vampires and zombies appear pretty much the same as their former human selves, albeit with some obvious changes, but even the more human-like wolfmen have drastically different features after a transformation. Right away, it's easy to see why if you're choosing a monster for your film, the werewolf is simply tougher to pull off. If they actually bite the silver bullet and go for featuring the werewolf as their monster, artists have a huge array of choices they can make when deciding what their creature will look like, affected by anything from personal preference, size of budget, how long their actors will sit in the makeup chair and so on. But it also should be dictated by the character and the story that surrounds them. In Teen Wolf, Michael J. Fox wants to be someone special, someone that stands out. His newfound lycanthropy is more of a superhero-esque power, granting him skills he could never have dreamed of before. He's different now of course, but he can't be the great beastly type of creature one might find in The Howling, as that wouldn't make sense. He has to be something approachable, potentially lovable. His look is dictated by the story. Now in The Howling, the creatures that threaten Dee Wallace are truly evil, reveling in their affliction and the pain it brings to others. Rob Bottin of The Thing fame created these hideous yet technically impressive monsters for director Joe Dante, and they really are the stuff of nightmares. It fits the world of the film and best of all, it helps you feel the way the characters do in the film. The characters' reactions help sell the werewolf designs. You believe in them. That for me is the most important part of the aesthetic of a werewolf. These are beasts that usually are supposed to strike fear into the hearts of the characters. They're terrifying, dangerous, brutally violent animals that can tear you apart at a moment's notice. Too many films for me now forget that these beasts are supposed to be scary. I'm not saying you're supposed to be scared of them as an audience, but you should be scared for the characters. You need to feel the intensity which comes from a combination of how these creatures look and how they are treated within the film, how they are filmed, how they are lit, how their transformations and attacks are edited.
This is my town, you little bastard!
This, to me, has no impact. These creatures are just humans with more hair and bigger claws. They're barely any different from the humans they've transformed from. That's not just because of how they look, but how they act and how they are shot. They don't feel impressive and they remain too human-like to be in any way memorable. There should be an anxiety from the characters about transforming, or perhaps they look forward to it, but it needs to feel like whatever is coming down the line is going to be pretty damn impressive. Obviously it's based on the context of the film, but for me the thing that really stands out about the werewolf is the inevitability of it. Whatever that person does, come the full moon, they're going to lose control. Once you're a zombie, and once you're a vampire, you're a vampire. But a werewolf is different. It's a race against time to protect those you love, to prepare for what is coming, or to just let go. What happens next is a force, something uncontrollable. And then, you have to come to terms with the aftermath. Being the werewolf and being hunted by the werewolf would, one would expect, be scary. The design of the beast is important for this again because it should be a creepy, horrifying prospect to face or to see oneself as. But there's another important aspect too. Something else that would really put anyone off being a werewolf. The transformation. Werewolves are in a way the ultimate body horror. Your body is going to be reshaped, your skin stretched out and covered with coarse hair, your bones broken and reformed, your fingernails and teeth replaced with claws and fangs. It sounds utterly horrendous, and it needs to look and sound that way. Would it make sense for the Lycans in Underworld to always go for a traumatic, violent change? Perhaps not, as within that universe, lycanthropy is something more like a weapon to be wielded, and thus requires the change to be more instant and the time as a werewolf more controllable. It works, but it's not memorable. The way it is shot is too slick, the creature's a little too bear-like, and of course the transformation's too easy. Werewolves can be such impressive beasts, the very idea of them horrific. The werewolves in Underworld, they could be any monster really. They're basically just shapeshifters. I cannot go on any longer, of course, without talking about American Werewolf in London. What Rick Baker achieved here for John Landis is still yet to be beaten. It's masterful stuff, with just the right amount of pain from David Norton, selling effects by Baker, directed perfectly by John Landis, who cuts at always the right time with the right rhythm. It's a painful sequence, and the later, shorter change doesn't get any easier. Werewolves are animals. They are the mutation of a man and a wolf, combined together in some unholy form for a few nights of bloody mayhem. They need to appear tangible. They are supposed to have a weird quality, a grossness. They need weight. Should they be so incredibly dexterous if they are something so unnatural? Doesn't it make sense that they be more lumbering or volatile? Horror films usually operate with relatively low budgets when compared to other genres, and typically they suffer most when it comes to poor or overused visual effects. To put it simply, horror films rarely have great CG, and it's rarely scary when it is used, even in the bigger budget stuff. I can understand why so many filmmakers decide to go for CG when it comes to their werewolves, mainly the transformations. The work it took Baker and Landis to achieve this, and the money, is unimaginable for most horror creatives. So turning to relatively affordable post-production work makes sense. The problem is, it rarely works. The transformation in The Howling is excellent, but it happens in between light and dark in shadows, cutting away often. It's very well planned. Many CG transformations happen in flat light and occur very quickly, almost as an afterthought. They can't linger as it will look terrible, so instead we usually cut to the flat mid-shot in very undynamic light with little reaction from the character as they go through what should be a very painful, very affecting change. It feels immediately artificial. There is no tangibility. It is a shame, as with some creativity, even having a CG transformation or CG beast may work, but arguably it takes as much time and effort for a computer-generated werewolf to appear convincing as it would for a practical one. Horror films are usually quite rushed, low-budget endeavors as mentioned, so make that work in your favor. That said, even in a large-scale production like The Wolfman, that purposely hired Rick Baker to do the effects, they later decided on making almost everything transformation-related CG. Now, 6 years on, the practical work in the film is still excellent, whereas the computer-generated imagery has aged dramatically. It is very, very hard to make a convincing CG werewolf, it seems, so maybe going practical is really the only convincing way to go, even if you're going to have to be creative to make it work. I'm a big fan of 2002's Dog Soldiers. It has creepy, inhuman beasts that we only see in flashes and either close up or from afar. They appear to move unnaturally and look terrifying. Some of that is because of simply how they look, but most of it is how they are featured in the film. We see them from low angles, so they appear huge. We see them in shadows or by the reactions of those looking at them. We see the bloody aftermath of their attacks that make us fear for characters that, thanks to some great performances and a decent script, we actually like. The costumes in Dog Soldiers couldn't really do much, so director Neil Marshall had to be creative. He didn't feature them too heavily, and when he did, he made sure to do everything he could around the actual costumes to make them as terrifying as he needed them to be. The film works because it knew the limitations it had to work with, and turned those limitations into tools to sell the effects they had. It's what Spielberg did with Jaws. He said that if he had it his way at the time, you'd see a lot more of the shark, and thus it wouldn't have been anywhere near as scary. That is true too for werewolves. Less really is more.
I became enamored of Rick's work, so I showed it too much. I still think when I see the movie, you see it too much, The Wolf.
I admired the recent film Late Phases for its use of practical effects, and it has an excellent transformation, one of the best I've seen since American Werewolf. But then the weird gremlin thing that comes out of it just isn't at all scary. It's too small in stature and looks too much like a costume to be anything particularly terrifying, and we see so much of it by the end of the film that it has no power at all. John Landis understood that a werewolf is a monster, a real, big, scary monster.
But my favorite shot of the wolf in the picture is the guy in the tubes when he collapses on the escalator and looks down, and the wolf enters like that at the bottom of the escalator. And that's my favorite shot because it looks so fucking big. And what is that, you know?
See too much of a monster and it loses power. If when you see it, it isn't impactful, it loses power. If what it does isn't gruesome, it loses power. Werewolves are born of the story they happen in. They should be unique to the characters they come from, their designs informed by the world around them, the context in which they occur. In American Werewolf in London, one of the reasons the creature is like it is in the name. David Norton's beast should be utterly out of place. The demon dog from hell in Piccadilly Circus, it's inherently ridiculous. It has to be menacing and horrifying. Pitting Old English bobbies against something so absurdly hellish is inherently amusing. What else can you do but laugh? It works for the horror, and it strengthens the comedy. In Ginger Snaps, the creature represents the changes becoming apparent in two sisters, with one giving herself over to her new urges, her new appetites. The creature is fleshy and disgusting. It is what the lead fears is going to happen to her as she grows, represented in physical form. Sex is of course something intrinsically linked to the werewolf myth. Turning primal, living out instinctual urges, letting go of inhibition. There can be as much as sensuality to the creatures and a roughness, the two of course not mutually exclusive either with human or animal. Making use of either the eroticism of the creature, if that fits the film thematically, or using the letting go, the release of becoming a werewolf as a metaphor, can be incredibly effective. Hell, even the Twilight films worked with that, though with that we go completely away from the hybrid man-wolf werewolf instead to films whose creatures appear almost exactly as wolves. From Wolfman and the Company of Wolves, to films as recent as the aforementioned Twilight series and Red Riding Hood, many have chosen to simply imply that man can become wolf. I've chosen to mention this less as really I'm talking what I would consider a werewolf monster here, but it can be effective if, frankly, a little uninspired. In the end, what makes a werewolf great for me is how it works within a great film. The quality of the film around the werewolf improves the werewolf within it, and the film around the werewolf is usually improved by how the creature within it is handled. If your werewolf is supposed to be a monster, as most are, then make them monsters. Make them big, make them violent, make them tangible. Make them a truly different beast, not just hairier versions of the humans they came from. And make transforming into one painful and prolonged and practical, as most of the time going the CG route simply won't work. Mainly, think about what this creature is to the character transforming into it, and how it will affect the world around it. What does this beast represent? Is it a power? Want to make the unremarkable remarkable? Is it a reflection of something in the character's life? A fear? A desire? And of course, pay attention to everything around the werewolf. You could have the most incredible practical effect possible, but if you don't care about the people around it, then all that work will go to waste. A great werewolf is memorable because the film it's in also is. In the end, you can forgive a less than convincing effect if you believe in the reactions of someone seeing it. A great werewolf doesn't stand out from the film, but feels an integral, inevitable part of it. To feel part of the world, it needs a practical, tangible physicality, and it needs to affect the world in a believable way. A great werewolf is hard to create, but not impossible. You just need to think hard about what it means in the film, what it means to the characters and thus the audience. You need to know your limitations and work within them, not in spite of them. The werewolf is a truly cinematic beast, an impressive creature that deserves time and effort. Audiences have gone too long without another fantastic werewolf. So hopefully soon, someone will have what it takes to bring back the werewolf in all its glory.
Wolfman's got nards!
If you like that, please like and subscribe and let me know what your favorite on-screen werewolves are. Thanks very much and have a great Halloween.